Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's May 20th, 2024, and I've been working in the gardens. Yesterday, Thea and I worked on weed mats in our central garden, and that's what I want to talk about today. Today, I'm actually working on some drip irrigation, getting the timers set for the west garden plot and the eastern garden plot. Takes a bit of time in the beginning of the spring each year, going through and checking your drip tapes, making sure there aren't any holes. Our cats will chew through them at times, the raccoons will play with them, and there can be issues, but usually I have to replace one or two in each garden. So the topic today are weed mats, and it's sort of a touchy subject among people. Weed mats are commonly used in market gardeners. These are the small scale, not necessarily such small scale, but not as big agricultural places using weed mats. And we've been using them over a dozen years now, and they have some significant benefits and some challenges with them. And some people who have experienced that the challenges want nothing whatsoever to do with weed mats again in the future, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You know, my thoughts are, if I could get away without using weed mats at all, I would. We certainly use cover crops. I pull the weed mats back after we take out the crop that we're growing during the season, and we put cover crops in. So that really helps to reduce the negative impact of weed mats. Weed mats are made from petroleum products. You know, these petroleum-based plastics and all degrade over time. The UV light from the sun breaks them down, so they have a limited lifespan. And depending on how they're composed, whether they're a single layer woven fabric or a multi-layer fabric, the multi-layer lasts longer, and you have less weed penetration through the weed mats as well. But let me just give you an idea of what I think some of the benefits are of the weed mats. One is it helps to reduce weeds, so that's obvious. It helps with soil temperature regulation, so that can really reduce the amount of heat that the soil is experiencing when you have the weed mats there. It helps with decreasing evaporation, more water, more moisture retention in the soil as well. It certainly helps with decreasing pathogens or opportunistic infections when the ground isn't covered. Now, certainly with a good cover crop going in between, that really benefits as well and reduces the negative impact. And I will add some of the benefits and challenges in a list below, and I'll try and post my full article on this on our website in the near future. I wrote it, but I just haven't had the chance to deal with it. It can contribute to soil compaction, which is negative. You don't want to have the soil compaction. It can decrease the amount of nutrients that the soil, that the plants that you're growing there are going to get over time. So a lot of people, like market gardeners, will be adding compost over and over again. I like having the cover crops, and that really does it naturally or does it organically, so I really like that way a lot. So soil compaction, nutrient depletion, it's costly, it's expensive stuff. The really good stuff is expensive, and it breaks down, and it is a petroleum-based product. So those are the negatives. However, the time saving that we experience with using the weed mats and the drip irrigation is worth all of the negative parts for it. One other potential negative, if you're transplanting plants, like Thea will be transplanting a couple of squash out here. She'll be planting the seeds as well. But we have we're just going with just a couple of tomato plants, some squash, and I can't think of what else she's going to be putting in here. But that will, the weed mats, the surface of the weed mats gets so hot that that it can damage the delicate tissues as the plants are first starting to grow. So protecting them, pulling the weed mat back, or putting cardboard on top of the weed mat just underneath where the transplant goes, those things can be helpful. So one of the big challenges I think that people experience with the weed mats is not keeping the surface clean and all. So we use a leaf blower to go through and remove the debris that gathers in here. Weed seeds, any nook and cranny, they will set up shop on. Having wrinkles or creases, folds in your weed mat allows places for sediment to collect, and the weed seeds have a place to take root, and then they can work their way down and penetrate. Using non-galvanized staples or corrosive staples and reusing and pulling those staples out again, that sort of thing. Down here you can see I use some aluminum screws because this is so rocky over here. Instead of our staples, couldn't get staples through, and some aluminum plates. Those plates are places where a weed seed can hook and send its root in between the two. The moisture retention will allow a weed to take off. So just like every couple of weeks coming in with a leaf blower will really help to reduce it. Years ago, before we started using them here, I laid down some weed fabric and put some beautiful decorative stone on top of it. Stones, pots, any bricks, anything that sits on the surface of a weed mat is an opportunity for the weeds to get started. So if you lay down weed mats and put your pots there, well, those pots have holes in them, little bits of soil come out, moisture comes out, ideal setup for the weeds to get started on the weed mat. So those are some of the things that I think about if you're considering using weed mats. That's it. Now the weed mats that we use, like these weed mats right in here, they're 3 and 4 foot wide ones. They start to fray a little bit, so I didn't burn the, I probably should go in there so you can see what I'm talking about. And I did level out some of the place. Used to use lots of wood chips. I'm not able to get as much wood chips as I was able to get years ago. And so yesterday I had to do some basic earthworks around here, and the quackgrass was making its way up to the weed mats. And once it gets up underneath the weed mats, it'll come up in the garden. It gets enough photosynthesis for a period of time, and those roots can really expand significantly. So there will be the frayed edges, and I didn't go through and do these ones. Let me see if I can get the camera down there. These little frayed edges and all, and little strings. So anything that gets in between these weed mats can really create opportunities. So these need to be put up, and just using a little bit of heat, we can seal this edge as well. So these weed mats here are probably at least 7 years old, some older than that. The original ones that we used, I did like market gardeners did. I went ahead and burnt holes for the desired spacing for the plants. I ended up ditching all of those weed mats because they just didn't follow the rule, and around the margins we found that that we would get weeds starting in there, or like corn, it'll send its roots down into there as well. So it was more of a hassle keeping those holes perfect throughout the time. So we switched to just doing rows, putting the weed fabric going right up to the edges of whatever we're doing. Most of the plants we grow are in single rows, but like the garlic and the shallots, there, we do 3 rows, and we mulch in between them. What was I going to say over here? So the weed mats that we use are DeWitt, and let me just show you a problem over here. So I had to replace this weed mat here. Now it was too narrow. This is a 5 foot wide weed mat, so that's our comfrey on the side here. And like I say, when it warms up an awful lot, like the next couple of days, I'll get the leaf blower out and just blow all of the caked material. But I want to show you this. Bear with me here 1 second. So this is a weed mat that came up from this spot. This was a 4 foot wide one. And what ended up happening was, along this margin here, which was up against the concrete here, Weeds will set root all along that margin right there. And I don't have a good solution for that. You could put a board on there, you could put bricks on there, but as I said, anything on the surface of it is going to allow weeds to go through. So two issues we had with this. One, we let some of the soil accumulate on top of the weed mat, and then, let's see if I can get down here and show you. And then the weeds go through and adhere it to the base. This weed mat is still salvageable and we'll save it. But also, some of the galvanized staples that we bought were not truly galvanized. And each one of these spots are spots where a weed can set root. So this one we can save. We'll just to use in one of the other beds. So I just got to clean it up. I'll let it sit here on the concrete for a couple of days in the heat, and then I'll use the leaf blower to blow most of the material out, and then I'll be able to cut the non-galvanized staples out of there so that they get set. So it's not perfect, the weed mats aren't. They are an environmental concern with all the microplastics in the environment now and the degradation of plastics. You know, it's crazy, and I certainly recognize that I don't like that. But this garden is, when we have our weed mats down, we spend so little time working in the gardens. It's either planting, transplanting, or harvesting, then pulling back the weed mats, getting the cover crop in, and getting that established. Then we set it and forget it, and over the winter, and then we terminate the cover crop, and then we can get ready for planting again. We're not out there pulling weeds all the time. And yes, do I have to take the leaf blower out every couple of weeks? Yes, and blow the stuff off of it. But it works really, really well. So I just wanted to share my thoughts about using the weed mats. I know some people hate them. The one other thing I didn't say here. So a good weed mat, now this is several years old, has multiple layers to it. So it has a fibrous connection underneath it. And you can see some of this is worn away over the years. But that helps with thermoregulation of the soil, and it helps the weed mats last longer. So it's like a little insulation barrier between the surface of the mat and the soil below, and I think it really helps to reduce the amount of weed penetration through the weed mat, except for those places that you're setting pots on them, setting bricks on them, setting boards on them, setting a planter on them, putting those little plates like I put on. All of those things can trigger weeds to get set up a good foothold. Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope it isn't too boring, but I know that weed mats can be really, really helpful as long as you know some of the challenges that come along with them. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Have a super fantastic and a safe day. Bye-bye now.